Welcome back to A3. Okay, guys, there is news of postponement happening, potential postponement. Actually, it's not even officially official, but we're talking about it. FIFA is set to postpone next year's inaugural Women's Club World Cup until 2027 at the earliest. Stakeholders are telling FIFA that they just need more time to get it done and to get it right. It sounds a little bit like a tale as old as time. Jess, that's a big, deep breath. Is that for the postponement? Is that for even the existence of a Club World Cup? Do we even need a Women's Club World Cup?
I think for viewership, I think that would be really good for the women's game. If I'm thinking from a player standpoint, having to play more games, doing a lot more to my body, I'm back and forth. But if this was going to be a thing, of course they're postponing it. Whatever their excuses are, they have the money, they have the resources, they can get this sorted. It's simple. And so with that being said, it's just a great opportunity to see who is the best in the world, who is the best league in the world. And so when you see these top teams playing up against one another, clashing, I think that's a really cool competition to see the women's game evolve, but also just seeing the best clubs playing against one another. I think that would just be very entertaining. And with the way women's football is just booming worldwide, right now is a great opportunity to have something like this. It truly is. And so things like this, postponing something for the women's game, doesn't even surprise me. I'm sick of going through things like this, as a female athlete. And so who knows if they're going to postpone it again? Who knows if they're even going to have this? And so I think this would be huge for club soccer globally, for the best clubs around the world, to see who actually is, and this is the way to prove it.
Lisa, in the chat, they're telling you that let's start with an NWSL All-Stars versus U.S. Women National Team game first at Lisa.
I would love that. I think there would be a little bit of crossover, though. Which one is Trinity Rodman going to play for?
Yeah. Hey, good question. True. Yeah.
With this Club World Cup, I agree, Jess. I think it needs to happen, especially because the conversation is which is the best league in the world. Sandra talks about the crown rotating from NWSL to WSL to Liga MX to France to wherever else the crown wants to go. But the way that this structure was originally set up, it was supposed to be a 16-team tournament between January and February of 2026 that would run on a 4-year cycle, not on an Olympics or a Women's World Cup year. So it worked out pretty well initially. Now they're talking about replicating the men's game a little bit, which would be a 4 to 6 team tournament taking place in between the 16-team tournament that rotates on a 4-year basis. But Dee, if they're rescheduling this to 2027, that's the same year as a Women's World Cup. I mean, players are going to prioritize the World Cup, right?
I'm tired. Why the hell would at the earliest date be 2027? It's even ridiculous to say, because if we learned anything from the Summer Cup this last year during the Olympics, it wasn't a great tournament. I mean, you're missing so much of your roster to the Olympics, so much so that Gotham, who made it to the final, mind you, 2 NWSL teams made it to the final, because every NWSL team got to play in this tournament and only 6 Liga MX teams. Gotham had to sign retired athletes to be on their team. They had to sign youth players to come be on their team just to make enough to make the roster requirement to play in this final. Why? If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't add up. If you can't bring the DNA of your team and the best of your team to a big competition like this, is it really serving the purpose of even having the competition? I mean, to play during a World Cup year is insanity to me. I'm sure there'll be something that goes on, but a Club World Cup, that should be when you have your full roster where we can really see the competition, because I am all for a Club World Cup. I love it. I would love to see the North Carolina play Barcelona. That's not just a friendly, but where there's something really on the line. Both teams are in good form in the middle of their season. but it really doesn't, the logic isn't logicking. I'm tired of it. Why are we saying 2027 at all? Who wrote that? Like it's all confusing, but I'm not surprised.
I mean, you mentioned Gotham last year competing in the qualifiers for the Club World Cup. That competition isn't even done yet, guys. We have the semis and the final coming up in just a few weeks. The team already looks different. It would have looked different from last season, 2024, to the semis in 2025, to what was supposed to be the Club World Cup in 2026, and now is ultimately 2027. So how do we possibly do qualifiers for a tournament that is so far out on a club team that's changing? I mean, you could also look at it national team wise. National teams change, and the players and the rosters change from World Cup qualifiers to a World Cup roster, Jess. So how would you propose setting this up so that we could see best competition against best competition in club teams?
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky, simply because the NWSL season is pretty different from all of the other seasons for other leagues globally. But I would like to see the best of the best play for these clubs at a time where you are at peak playing wise, because if a team is playing another team that's, let's say, in the middle of preseason, they're not fully fit, whereas competition wouldn't be as great. So can we find a date where, we can mesh these clubs in? Maybe the NWSL could have these games happening without being a complication with the actual regular season. So these other
teams,
is
this ever going to be possible, Jess, considering the NWSL plays on a different schedule than the rest of the world?
Yeah, I know. And that's the complication. You know what I mean? I want to see two of the best clubs, like, a Barcelona and Orlando Pride, to play when they're fully fit. Because a lot of the outside world, if you're not an athlete or if you haven't been in it, who's going to have more of an advantage over the other team. I want to see both teams fit in their season, at their peak fitness and going at it. So we can figure out dates. They like to make things difficult. We said simplicity earlier. It's simple. There could be an overall weekend where we can have these games happening instead of NWSL regular season games. There's a way to do things. There's always more than one way to do things, but one team coming to play in their off season in comparison to a team that's in season, competition wouldn't be as great. So, hey, we can figure some things out. We can tweak the schedule a little bit.
Wait, funky old Medina, this is
funny.
Hilarious. Don't give me tickets to Broadway, and then when I show up, it's 6th grade understudies. Hey, retweet. Live in New York. I'm with that. I just think I posted something in our chat of, I wish I didn't say we, because it's not us. I wish that they didn't. Lisa, what show was it where we said we said we want things to change, like going into 2025? And I think one of mine was, don't propose tournaments that seemed half-assed, basically. Mm-hmm. Do not announce something with a date, with a timeline, anything to the public that, we've been calling for a Club World Cup. I think it'd be a great tournament. When you don't have anything set up, why are you overselling something that could be incredible and constantly under-delivering? So just hold off, just wait a little bit. And also, something that the men's league has done is they put a big pot of money in front of these players for incentive, for these clubs, for these players. If you win this, I think it's a nearly $1 billion. I don't know, that is like after tax or whatever, depending on where you live, but $1 billion as an incentive to win this tournament. There needs to be something like that, because yes, Jess, that scheduling and Lisa, what you brought up with the timing of the leagues is really difficult. But if you have something that will make a team or a league adjust a little bit to participate in this, because it brings visibility and maybe more sponsorship dollars to that league and that team, I think that would make the conversation a little simpler and people would actually adjust. But it's women's soccer. We don't know what the dollar signs are in front of this, if that was even considered before announcing.
if there is even dollar signs. That
Yeah,
was the whole case
exactly.
of the Summer Cup last year. We were at the final, like, what's happening? Is there money on the line? I mean, there are so many different layers of issues that come down to it, but one of them that we can actually talk about here, besides the investment, right? We could shout that from the rooftops all day, but congestion. Is there a point where players just say this is too much? Like, what is that limit where you would say I'm out? I can't compete in all these different tournaments when I'm not in form, or if we're having this competition when, Jess, you mentioned on the calendar, you want it to make sense for you as a team and as a player to be in peak form to compete. But is there a point where you say this is just too much for my body?
Honestly, they've got to make it worth my while. I think at some point in your playing career, you know how to take care of your body. And with that being said, it's all about preparation, recovery, all of those things, diet. I mean, you name it. And so I think it would have to be worth my while.
How much?
Give me my money.
How much would make it worth your while?
You know what I'm saying? Give me
Put
my
a dollar
money.
sign on it. Put a dollar sign on it.
I've been a mom my whole playing career. I played for 13 years and I was a mom for 12 of it. So I mean, I would have to look at, money for childcare. I mean, it's a long list of things. And as my kid gets older, things get a little more expensive. So you're talking about $1 billion, Darian. I mean, if FIFA can slap $1 billion, they can slap a couple million for the women's game. You know what I mean? It's all about investment. So if I could sit there and cash out, sprinkle a little 6 figures into my bank account, hey, worth my while. You know what I mean? This is me as a mom and a pro athlete thinking here, both sides of it. So, I mean, if we're pushing 6 figures here per player, I mean, give me my money.
It's not unreasonable. Like that is what you should be paid, if not more. We're also coming from knowing the women's game, knowing that it's not going to be $1 billion. I think just knowing the disparity between men and women soccer players, it's not going to be $1 billion, but the incentive has to be very high, especially if you're out of season. You have to be fit. You want to be healthy. Thinking about going into the next season, it's a lot. The scheduling, I understand, can be tough, but I think is prematurely announced, if we're saying this, also prematurely potentially rescheduled to 2027 is quite bizarre.
Titus on YouTube with us, Titus Oz, saying in Europe, we don't want a Club World Cup. We just value our Champions League better. Interesting point here. Is there a point, Darian, where we could get the FIFA Club World Cup to the status of Champions League?
It would take a really long time. The history of Champions League runs deep. I don't think the Club World Cup has that history. The icons that have come through it, that have come through Champions League, the richness of the game, it would just be completely different. I don't think it would be one and the same at all as a Champions League. It would be its completely own entity. And as to like what that would mean to people's hearts as opposed to Champions League, I think it's incomparable.
Yeah, we can't get there. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. It's going to take a lot of time. We're going to be a little older, a little grayer by the time, I think, if we see it happen.
20 years from now, we'll be like, oh, remember.
Logging back into StreamYard. Mark, roll the clip. I don't know why I became British. I'm not. That's just my old person voice was bad.
You're going to move to Europe in your old age and just get an accent, D?
Yeah, I'm dead.
I'm not.
Roll the tape.
Roll the tape.
Smart.
StreamYard won't even be a thing in 20 years. We'll just be like virtually AI chatting with each other.
True.
Seriously. The vote hasn't happened yet. We'll see what happens and keep you guys updated on the FIFA Club World Cup. Right now, it's set to be postponed until 2027, but there has been no new announcements or details actually since the original one that announcement came back in May of 2024. So the semis and the playoffs are still set for a couple of weeks from now. We'll talk about them, we'll preview them, we'll get you up to date on everything that's happening there.